Good morning, Facebook. Ranger Eric here at Mustang Island State Park. We're going to do a scavenger hunt today. And with me, I've got my co-worker, Josie.
Hi.
She is from Lake Corpus Christi State Park. And she's going to be joining us today for our scavenger hunt. So we've got a few things on our scavenger hunt already. And Josie is from the Northeast. She's up from the Big Thicket part of Texas. And so some of this stuff might be new to her. I'm going to let her pick probably 2 things to add to the scavenger list. And then also I want the audience to pick the last 2. So we can get a good, is that in focus right there? Okay. Sargassum seaweed on our scavenger hunt list. This seaweed is naturally a free-floating seaweed. Sometimes it does attach, and it's from what they call the Sargasso Sea, which is basically a part of the Atlantic Ocean. And it breaks off during storms, and it starts to wash around and float into the ocean current. And you can see it's got these little things that look like seeds, but these are actually air bladders. And so those air bladders help it stay at the top of the water column so that it can photosynthesize. Photosynthesize, yeah, that's the word. So pretty cool plant. And it's really neat when it's out in the ocean. It's its own habitat. And crabs and shrimp that have camouflage that makes them look exactly like this seaweed, and they live nowhere else except for in this seaweed. So there's like a sargassum frogfish that gulps on those shrimp. And then the other animal that heavily relies on this seaweed are sea turtles, baby sea turtles. So when a baby sea turtle hatches, it crawls out of the sand, it crosses this big expanse of beach, and it has to swim through the ocean, the open ocean, until it can find a patch of this seaweed. And once it does, it has refuge from predators, and it has a food source. So there we go. Sargassum seaweed is off the list. Let's add, I know you're getting into birding now, is that right?
Right.
Okay, so is there any specific bird you want to see?
How about that black-bellied plover?
Black-bellied plover. I think I saw one this week. So as we're walking, let's walk up to the jetty. We'll get started on that walk, and maybe we will see one along the way. So far, I'm seeing, it's hard to tell, but I think these are least terns.
Okay.
And they're dive bombing for like probably little anchovies and stuff that might be in the water there. And of course, we've got our laughing gulls, our birds that are pretty much here year-round. Oh, real quick, we've got bivalve and gastropod. And there are quite a few shells that have washed in since the past high tide. So I want to show you this real quick. This I think is really cool. Let me see if I can find it again. Okay, here it is. So we're going to scratch this off. This is a bivalve mollusk, which means it's a clam, right? It has 2 parts of its shell. Well, the cool thing to me is that it's got evidence of being preyed upon right here on the back of the shell. You see that little hole right there? So that little hole was made from a gastropod. And a gastropod is a fancy word for snail. So we have these marine snails that go around and they eat bivalve mollusks. So we'll scratch off the bivalve. And I see something that Josie is pointing. And you know, I said it'd be really rare to find this, but here it is. Okay. There it is. Yeah, let's see. Let's flip it over. So you guys aren't going to believe this. A whole sand dollar, and unfortunately, it is recently dead. And I know that because it still has all these little fine bristles on it. Now it's just like a starfish or a sea cucumber. They have what's called tube feet. And these little feet just help them walk along the ocean floor. And a more correct name for this is keyhole urchin, because this is actually a sea urchin. It's in the same family as sea urchins. And this would be the keyhole. And you can see it's bilateral symmetry. So if you fold this in half, it's the same on both sides. So there's a hole here, 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 and here, and then one right in the middle. And so this is a filter feeder. Basically, they're scavengers. They're just scooting along the ocean floor looking for any kind of detritus, which just means broken down organic material. So pretty cool find. I'm going to leave this here. I have my own sand dollars. Somebody else might be lucky enough to find it. Anyway, we're going to talk about paraffin wax now. So paraffin wax is a natural component of crude oil. And these tanks, these ocean liners have ballast tanks. And it's perfectly legal for them to flush their tanks or clean their tanks when they're out in the ocean. And this is the leftover part of, this is actually what they're cleaning out of their tanks. So paraffin wax. I don't know if it's environmentally friendly or not. I do see birds occasionally pecking on this. I don't know if it's going to be like, clogging up their digestive system, but it is what it is. It's here, right? Can we see a jellyfish? That is a great question. I'll keep my eyes open. I'll put it on the list because that's a good one. We have not had a very heavy, so they're like a seasonal thing or wind-driven thing. Like most things that wash up at Mustang Island, it's all because of the ocean currents and the wind, right? So jellyfish are also suspended in the water, and they get moved around because they have a little bit of locomotion. They can move up and down in the water column, and sometimes they can move in a horizontal direction, but they're just at the mercy of the ocean currents. So I'm going to put that on the list. When they mention jellyfish, you can see as you're walking, some things reflect light, and that's the best way to find a jellyfish. Check this out. I saw the sun reflecting.
Aha!
All right, so this guy is pretty torn up, but this is a jellyfish. I think it's a sea nettle. It's really hard to tell because it's been pretty much beaten up by the surf and churned up. And don't do what I'm doing. The skin on my hand is fairly calloused and tough, so it can't really sting me, and it's probably dead. But sometimes jellyfish, when they're on the beach, are still alive enough to sting you. So they have these little cells called nematocysts that it's like a little tiny harpoon, and they inject you with venom. And that's what they use to catch their food and to keep their food from swimming away. It paralyzes the fish. We've had times where there are millions of sea nettles. And sea nettles are probably second worst sting, right behind the Portuguese man-o-war. Unlike the man-o-war, which floats on the top, is bright blue, you can see it from a mile away, and you can try to avoid it. The sea nettle kind of blends in with the water. It's clear, and it's really hard to spot. So to me, that's worse because people are unsuspecting. They just get in the water thinking that they're fine, but the sea nettle is the worst. Some people might be wondering why I'm walking here instead of down further closer to the water. And the reason for that is because I'm walking along what's called the rack line or the debris line. So if you focus on the beach itself, all this debris right here has washed up since last night. And I know that because I checked it out yesterday morning. So all the seaweed is mostly fresh from yesterday. And that's also the best place to find shells. We're still seeing lots of stuff washing in. There's actually a few little pieces of tar balls. I think those are pieces of tar balls, but look, check it out. I found a sea bean. They call this a tropical almond. It's actually really soft and squishy, but that's our sea bean. So we'll check that one off the list. As far as any information I can give you, like I said, it floats in the ocean current. It comes from Central and South America. It's not the most interesting sea bean to me, so I'm going to keep my eyes open for one more called the hamburger bean. To me, the hamburger bean is the most interesting of the sea beans. I'm sorry, the hamburger bean looks like a hamburger. It's dark brown on both sides and it has a black stripe down the middle. We call it the hamburger bean because I guess Americans are like obsessed with food, right? But in Central America, they call it ojo de venado. And ojo de venado translates to eye of the deer. And they believe that it has spiritual or medicinal powers and it can ward off evil spirits. And so they'll actually polish it up and they'll make a bracelet and they'll put it around their toddler's wrist for good luck. And to me, I think that's pretty neat.
So Paul asked, can the sea beans be replanted?
That's a good question. So I'm pretty sure they can. You would want to have like a similar climate to Central South America. So here in Texas, we're subtropical, and down there they're tropical. So any seed that you find washed up here would probably have to be insulated from the winter months. I do get people asking a lot of times about what they're allowed to take. Are they allowed to take seashells? And that's a good question because a lot of times you'll find seashells that don't have an animal inside of them, like they're vacant. So that, in that instance, it's okay. There's not a hard rule. I mean, most parks have a rule that you can't take anything from the state park and you can't dig a hole. Our park is a little bit unique in that aspect. You can dig a hole for a fire on the beach or to build a sandcastle, we just ask that you don't have any wood with nails in it and that you cover your hole and your fire back up when you're done. And make sure the fire is extinguished. And real quick, Josie, this is for you. I'm going to show you this. This is evidence of a gastropod. It's not a gastropod, but it's the egg sac or the egg case of the moon snail. Now, I did see a moon snail earlier, and this is, to me, most gastropods, they have like a fibrous, kind of keratinized egg sac, and like a string of eggs. This is the only one that I know of. You can actually kind of see it. It's kind of translucent. I wonder if they'll be able to see. But so they call it an egg collar. So the snail, when it lays its egg, he's right here in the middle, and he wraps this collar of mucus, sand, and eggs around himself, and it kind of dries, and it's pretty fragile. It's not brittle, but you can just kind of tear it real easily. Most people just think that it's trash or something, but that's natural material. I've been waiting for this. Okay, so I don't know if this would be the best example, but this little shape right here, you see how it's kind of diamond shaped? There's another little piece torn right here. So that's turtle bites. So this trash that ends up in the ocean looks like food to them. So some of the sea turtles' favorite food is jellyfish, and any kind of trash that might resemble jellyfish is going to get chewed on. Now, a lot of times we'll get sick sea turtles that have eaten so much plastic that they can't digest their normal food. So pretty tragic stuff. And then the other thing is microplastic. You know, once the plastic breaks down, it becomes tiny little particles that get integrated into the natural soil. And so there's a big question going around, like, you know, is this gonna cause major ecological damage at some point besides just the wildlife, you know, all dying, whales and dolphins, turtles, all having, you know, leftover fishing line or plastic in their stomachs. Why don't we zoom into the rack line? The microplastic is pretty bad today. All this white speck stuff here, this is all microplastic. All this little microplastic stuff is going to eventually get washed up into our sand dunes. Any kind of equipment that you put on the beach is disturbing the natural processes, such as ghost crabs. So you can see where the ghost crab has been excavating his hole, and he lives down there. Most of the time, most of the animals that live at Mustang Island, you're not going to see them because they're hiding. They have to hide from predators and the sun. There is no shade out here. So they're going to be crepuscular. There's a fancy word for you. You guys all probably know nocturnal and diurnal, and now you know crepuscular, which means active at dawn and dusk. Oh, cool. Triggerfish. I get this mixed up sometimes. Triggerfish and filefish to me look so similar, but I think that's a triggerfish. When do you find sand dollars? The answer is after a big storm, and usually in the wintertime. And I say that because what happens is we get those big cold fronts that push the tide really far down, and it leaves a lot of those animals stranded. So after like 3 or 4 days after a major cold front, come out when the tide is really low, and that's when the best time to find sand dollars. A snail, any kind of evidence or fragment of a snail shell, which gastropod is Latin for stomach foot, right? So a snail just crawls along the ocean floor. If you find a snail in your garden, it is herbivorous. In other words, it's eating cucumbers and grass and whatever else. The snails that we find in the ocean are carnivorous predators. All right, well, we're at the jetties here. So Josie, I know that this is probably the main reason a lot of people come to our park. Now the reason for that is because it's like a fishing pier. It goes further out into the water, so it's easier to get your bait where you want it. And it also attracts fish because it provides a habitat for juvenile fish to hide. And anytime you have juvenile small fish, you're going to have the larger predator fish hunting for them. I don't know. Oh, I can find a gastropod. I know exactly where to go. Oh, yeah? So let's follow me. Okay. Hopefully this is as easy as it has been in the past. Of course, as soon as I'm trying to look for it, it's going to be impossible to find. But I know where to look. So in these tide pools, there is a little snail called a rock snail. most of the time they're clinging to the side of these rocks. You got to get out to where the tide line, the lowest tide would be, and that's where you're going to find those snails stuck on these rocks. Okay, of course I'm making it here. Man, sometimes I can find these things like 1,000 every square meter, and sometimes I have a program in it and they're not cooperating. There's a tiny one here, or we're gonna have to do it with a tiny one. So this is like the tiniest gastropod, and his shell is even kind of cracked. I don't know how this guy is surviving. How does that look on camera? Is it super tiny?
Yeah, I might be able to zoom in.
So yeah, super tiny little gastropod. So I'm Ranger Eric. We're signing out.